It wasn't easy or pretty, but if you want to be the best, you have to win these games. Justin Herbert and the Chargers battled their way to a 3-0 start in 2025 with a gutsy come-from-behind win against the Denver Broncos, cementing once and for all that Herbert and Harbaugh are built different. What's up, everyone? I'm Sam Peña, a Bolt fan in the Berg for Chargers Digest. We're celebrating 3-0, baby. The Chargers, not just the first 3 wins of the season, but also 3 wins against divisional opponents. That is huge when it comes to the Chargers making a push to win the AFC West this year and maybe potentially even take home the 1 seed. I know it's still early, so let's not dream too big at the moment, but what a start this season for the Bolts, and what a start for Justin Herbert and this offense making a statement to be one of the best in the entire NFL. Today we're talking about our takeaways from yesterday's game against the Denver Broncos, and so without further ado, let's talk about it. First things first, you can't talk about this game without mentioning Justin Herbert. So far, Justin Herbert is the NFL MVP this season. He's currently first in the league in passing yards. He's second in touchdown passes, has thrown the second fewest interceptions, and has one of the top 5 passer ratings in the entire league. Herbert has been setting the NFL on fire to start this season, and he did that against the Broncos in a game when it looked like the Chargers were going to lose. In the fourth quarter of that game, Herbert went 12 of 15 for 123 passing yards with 1 touchdown and had 8 first downs. That's massive for the Chargers. They put out a statement against the Denver Broncos, who were harassing him all game long. Herbert is showing that he is not only one of the best quarterbacks in the league, but potentially turning the Chargers into one of the best teams in the entire league. I think the most impressive part yesterday about the game for Herbert was the fact that this is a game we've seen him and the Chargers lose in the past. Multiple times we've seen them up big, and then it seems like everything tends to fall apart. They were up 10-0 to start the game, and then they gave up 17 straight points to the Broncos, and it was just a series of bad plays after bad plays. There was the 4th and 2 touchdown they gave up to the Broncos. Gilman bit down hard, and then that was followed up by a 3-play touchdown drive for the Broncos to start the second half, and then a fumble on a kickoff. Normally in the past, we've seen those plays doom the Chargers, but not this team and not Justin Herbert, who's proving that he's built different. Justin Herbert in the second half of that game was phenomenal, and even in the first half, he was pretty good as well. I think when you look at his numbers overall, they're not the most impressive of his entire career, only 1 touchdown pass and also a sub 60% completion percentage, but he made the plays when it mattered most, which is something people have been asking him to do for years, even though he already has done it for years. Justin Herbert has the 4th most come-from-behind victories in the 4th quarter of a game since he came into the league. The only people he's behind are Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Kirk Cousins, of all people. If you look at the stats, Kirk Cousins had a crazy streak in 2022 where he had like 8 straight game-winning 4th quarter drives. But Herbert has shown in the past that he is a clutch quarterback. The wins are just now coming along with it. So I think all Chargers fans can collectively sit here and say in unison, thank you, Madison Beer. Moving on to my second takeaway of the game. This is on the negative side. The pass blocking needs some work. I felt a little bit like the Chargers' first 2 weeks of the season when it came to the offensive line play were a little bit of fool's gold, and I think against the Broncos, that was proven to be the case. In the first 2 weeks, the Chargers, I believe, were 7th in the league in pass block win rate. Well, they were terrible yesterday against the Denver Broncos. Justin Herbert was under pressure on 54% of his snaps, the most in his entire career. And when you look at the individual players, it makes sense. First of all, we know Joe Hortiz is one of the best left tackles or right tackles in the league. He was fantastic again yesterday against the Broncos. But that's pretty much the only positive takeaway you can say from this game. Bradley Bozeman was serviceable at the center position. Beyond that, everyone else struggled mightily. Over at left guard, Zion Johnson was a bit up and down, but on that amazing touchdown pass Herbert had, he was completely destroyed along the defensive line. And then when you look at the right guard and right tackle spot, Mekhi Becton went out partway through the game with a concussion. And then at right tackle, we saw Trey Pipkins struggle before he also got injured. In his place, Jamari Salyer came in, and Jamari Salyer was probably the worst offensive lineman on the field. Now, I will say the Denver Broncos have one of the best pass rushers in all of football, but if you're a team that's going to expect to be at the end of the year and contention for a Super Bowl, you have to protect the quarterback. And right now, I'm not seeing that out of the Chargers. And that leads to my third takeaway from this game, which is without Harris, I'm worried about running backs chipping. This is going to be something that's very important for the Chargers throughout the season. Because their offensive line is probably going to struggle, they need their running backs to be able to step up and protect Herbert in those little tiny moments to be able to give him that extra half second to be able to throw the football. Yesterday, we saw Omarion Hampton struggle to be able to create those chips against the Broncos pass rushers, and Najee Harris, who was going to be our best pass protecting back, well, guess what? He's done for the year with an Achilles injury. That's going to hurt. Now, fortunately, Hampton did show up in some other areas, which leads to my next takeaway, which is Hampton taking a step forward as a running back. He had his first 100-plus yards from scrimmage game of his entire career and his first touchdown of his career. So positive upgrades there from Omarion Hampton. He also forced 7 missed tackles, which I believe is third in the league for this week. So Hampton is taking a positive step forward, but we have to see him get a little bit more consistent with his anchor as a pass protector to be able to give Herbert just a little bit of extra time to be able to get off some of these throws, or else it's going to be a long season. Moving on over to the defensive side, it's a bit of a mixed bag there. Overall, they played pretty well. They held the Broncos to only 20 points in this game, but you saw some of the issues in week 1 pop up once again, specifically when it comes to communications. My next takeaway, which is the secondary needs to communicate better. That huge touchdown pass that brought the Broncos back into it at the end of the second quarter on 4th down and 2, that's a play when the Chargers have to get off the field. In fact, their 4th down numbers are not great this year on the defensive side. They've given up more 4th down completions, I believe, this year than they have 3rd down completions. And a big part of that is the fact that they're not communicating well in the secondary right now. Gilman and I believe it was Benjamin St-Juste didn't communicate properly on that big touchdown pass from Bo Nix and allowed him to go right past Alohi Gilman, who was caught chasing after him. And then later on in the game as well, they struggled to be able to contain Troy Franklin. And even on the Broncos' last drive, there was an opportunity for Denver to have a chance to potentially go down and maybe score a game-winning field goal or touchdown. And fortunately, Bo Nix just barely missed Courtland Sutton down the left sideline. That was against Dante Jackson, who had the worst grade of his entire career yesterday after 2 fantastic games to start the season. The Bolts are going to have to get better at communicating in the secondary if they want to continue the defensive success they've seen for most of this year, because they will continue to play zone coverage at a pretty high rate. That's one of Jesse Minter's staples. I do believe this Chargers defense is going to do that, but it's some things they have to clean up there. But on the positive side, my next takeaway from this game is Derwin James is making his case to be the defensive player of the year. Yesterday, he had 4 tackles for loss, the most out of any safety or secondary player this year, and I believe in the last 5 years as well. Derwin was all over the place for the Chargers, showing that he's a team captain for a reason. He was fantastic in coverage. The Broncos just couldn't throw his way whatsoever. And then in the running game, he stepped up multiple times and made some big tackles to be able to give the Chargers the football back. Overall, this game was a net positive for the Chargers. I know it's not the best win that they've ever had, but 3-0 is 3-0. And Jim Harbaugh has instilled belief in this team that we haven't seen there in years. You just look at the post-game press conferences, the belief that these Bolts players have, not just in Justin Herbert, but in Harbaugh, is astounding. Deion Henley and Derwin James continue to talk about how this team just feels different than the Staley years, and that in years past, these were games that they felt like they were going to lose. Well, that's not the case anymore. And I kind of felt that start to happen last year during that Bengals game when they blew that huge 21-point lead over the Bengals. But then in the 4th quarter, Herbert led a game-winning touchdown drive that officially put the Charger narrative to bed. That's where I felt like the start of this getting over the hump was for the Chargers. But then they had that terrible game against the Houston Texans, and it felt like, okay, maybe there's still a few demons here you have to conquer. Fortunately, I feel like yesterday's game kind of solidified that those demons are in the past right now for the Bolts. 3-0 to start the year, 3-0 against the division, and just the start of being a Super Bowl contender. Thank you all so much again for watching. I'm Sam Peña, a Bolt fan in the Berg. This is where we talk about all things Lightning, y'all. I would love it if you guys could like and subscribe. We're going to continue to build the channel from the ground up here. And remember, Bolt Nation, always and forever, Bolt up.